Lecture 10, Part 3 of 4 parts. And we're looking still at Post-Impressionism, and yeah, some of these painters are very famous, including this guy, Vincent van Gogh. So he's one of the 3 that we will look at. Van Gogh is Dutch, just like Rembrandt, and he's from the Netherlands, which is way up there in Northern Europe. And he decided to pack his bags and go south to the art capital of the world, to Paris, France. He didn't really stay there that long. The urban center, like Gauguin, didn't really agree with him, so he went even further south to a real small, sleepy town in southern France called Arles. So down there is where he spent the main part of his very short artistic career. And here is one of the paintings, one of his most famous paintings, produced there in Arles. So it's 1888, Post-Impressionism, somewhere between 1880 to 1900. And this is called the Night Cafe. And there in Arles, he would go to this place and observe how these family men would leave their families at night and go to this cafe and play billiards and drink and carouse with the women there, basically waste their life and totally derail the direction that they should be going on. So he saw this as a very sinister, destructive environment, and he tried to express that in his art. He wrote a letter about this, and I'm not going to read it all. But the first part is something that I'm most interested in. He wrote this to his brother Theo. And he starts out by saying, "Hey, Theo, I have tried to express the terrible passions of humanity by means of red and green." And by terrible passions of humanity, again, those destructive forces that draw our spirit down is what he's trying to convey here. But the point is, look how he tries to do it. He says, by means of red and green. Those are complementary colors, opposite colors. They represent simultaneous contrast. He thought the very psychological clashing of these colors could somehow open up the psychological torment of the subject and help us enter into this hell-like furnace. And this shows you what absolute faith that Gauguin and Van Gogh both had in color theory, thinking it was like a new mechanism to express the inner quality of their subjects. Neither Van Gogh or Gauguin were interested in expressing the outward reality, though they certainly could do that, of their subject. They wanted to release through color the inner psychological spiritual energy contained in their subjects. Yeah, as I said, the biggest influence that Impressionism had on subsequent movements is color theory. We're looking at that fact with Van Gogh. Yeah, and going back to this painting, another thing, besides color theory, if you got up closer to this painting, which is in the Yale Art Museum, you would see right there that in those areas of the painting, the surfaces are actually raised in relief. Like that bottle on the left there is actually sculpted like a very shallow relief of a bottle. The billiard balls on the table there actually stand out as hemispherical. And the same is true with the 3 lanterns. There's real pronounced relief. And you can sort of see that in the floorboards of this cafe, how he's almost like dragged his brush, or maybe even the butt of his brush handle, into the surface of the painting to really give it a palpable, textured feel to it. The point is this. Van Gogh really relied on brushwork, expressionistic brushwork, to help convey the energy, the psychology of his subject. So expressionism and brushwork is something that we connect with Van Gogh's painting, expressionistic brushstrokes. Yeah, Van Gogh, known for his expressionistic brushwork. There you go. Of course, the same observations can be made on another, even more famous painting by Van Gogh, done the year after, The Starry Night. Get a little closer to that, man, and I mean, there's nothing smooth about the surface of this painting. Again, and far more textured than anything we saw with Gauguin. So expressionistic brushwork is a key element of Van Gogh, and he's doing it in order to convey the psychological content beyond the surfaces of his subject matter. Hey, look at these two portraits by Van Gogh. The one on the left is an early example. Get a little closer to that. And you can see that, wow, so he, painted naturalistically initially. And you can see like his Dutch origins. Get even a little closer. That is brushwork of a Dutchman. It goes back to Rembrandt and Hals, Frans Hals that we saw before. This layered expressionistic, fluid, sculptural brushwork when he's painting in a more naturalistic manner. But you introduce Van Gogh to Impressionism and color theory, and it totally changes his approach to painting. As we see in this beautiful, mesmerizing self-portrait. Look at the brushworks. They just radiate from his nose and his eyebrow. You can just run your hand over it and feel the individual strokes. And look in the lapel of his jacket, how individualized the application of the paint is. He's trying to keep the color so strong and concentrated. And you can see that in his red beard. And he has green mixed in there with the red to try to make the red even more pronounced. That's another example of simultaneous contrast. Yeah, get up a little closer. It's amazing. It almost becomes non-representational painting, abstract painting. You can't make anything out except color and brushwork until you walk back and see that, oh, it's a portrait. Hey, are those his lips there? Look at that. It's amazing. And his eyes, the individual strokes, keeping the intense hues of the colors pure and radiating. And you compare that to our friend Bouguereau, that great salon artist of the second half of the 19th century. His work is so glass smooth like porcelain. In contrast to that, Van Gogh is all about brushwork and expressionism. So again, Van Gogh, a post-impressionist, another example of the avant-garde, going away, pulling away from the center, the status quo, the recognized, approved cultural style of the salon system with Adolphe William Bouguereau on the left. There's one more post-impressionist that we're going to look at, introduce some here, and then in the next and final segment of the lecture, we'll wrap up the main points. His name is Paul Cézanne, and maybe you haven't heard of him, unlike Van Gogh and maybe Gauguin, but Paul Cézanne is a very important artist. In fact, he is known as the father of modern art. His innovations were so groundbreaking and influential of the post-impressionists that we're looking at. He's also the oldest, so he had this fatherly, masterful position among these avant-garde artists. They would look to him out of respect and also for guidance. Hey, remember the salon jury, that you had to get over that hurdle? Well, he tried to do that and he was rejected. In fact, the first time he was rejected was in the 1863 salon that led to the Salon of the Rejected Works, if you remember that, with Manet and the Luncheon on the Grass. That didn't stop Cezanne, though. He kept on going after that hurdle. In fact, he tried 20 different times, 20 different years to get over it, and they rejected him each and every time until finally, in his late period, he was accepted once. So, in his early period, he's absolutely looking for a place to show his art. And to reiterate a point I made earlier, prior to the Impressionist show, the first Impressionist show in 1874, there were not alternative exhibition spaces there in the art capital of the world, in Paris. But by the end of the 19th century, thanks to the Impressionists breaking through the barrier, there were alternative spaces, options for an artist to show their work. But when he saw the Impressionist show, he said, yeah, let me apply to that as well, because I'm making no headway with the salon. If we open up that exhibition catalog, right there we can see Paul Cézanne's name. So he was among the very first to enter his work. And the one that's listed there is a modern Olympia. So again, he's drawing his subject and composition to an extent from Manet, that very influential, rebellious artist during the 1860s. So now in the 1870s, we see his influence with Cézanne. Not to get into it, but clearly he's influenced by the Impressionist palette and brushwork, things that we've sort of looked at. But Cézanne did not want to be counted among the Impressionists. He wanted to what? Not be a human camera. He wanted to go beyond and do something else with the toolkit that Impressionism had given this new generation of artists. And that makes him, of course, a post-impressionist. But he's different. Cézanne is different from the other two examples, Gauguin and Van Gogh. Cézanne is far more cerebral and intellectual in his approach to composing a work of art. And that's what he really did not like about Impressionism. They would go out, set up their easel, open their eyes, and just simply record what they saw. Cézanne wanted to compose. He wanted to orchestrate. He wanted the mind of the artist to control the construction of the work. For him, that is what art was all about. All right. Okay, that's it. This section was a little short. The next one will be a little longer, but that's okay too.